Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name is Stacey if you're new here, and today's video is going to be my February book recap. I read 4 books this month and I'm going to go into a little bit more details about the books in this video than I did with my January one because it was short and sweet and simple, but I kind of want to go through and actually tell you what the stories are about a little bit more in depth than I did previously. The first book that I read was Onyx Storm. I kind of read majority of it from January into February, but I finished it in February, and that was the second time I read Onyx Storm. And if you saw my last video, I talked about how much I love the Empyrean series, and it is definitely one of my favorite stories of all time. And I just felt like I needed to hop into a world that I love. And yeah, that's actually one of my big tips for getting myself out of a quote-unquote little reading slump, because I don't always find myself in like a full-on slump where I'm not reading, because I'm always finding something to read. It's just more of like, what am I reading? That is the question. Like, I am finding something to either reread or that I enjoy, or I'm just diving into an easy read. That's kind of where I was at. And I have a handful of things and thoughts about Onyx Storm that I texted my friend about, and I'm gonna talk about that here. So if you don't want any spoilers about Onyx Storm, or you don't care to hear about theories and things, because this is an incomplete series, so I'm going to hop into that here, but you can skip to this point if you don't want any of these spoilers. Okay, I had to scroll back because I texted her on February 10th and today is the 22nd. Yes, 22nd. So here is everything that I typed out to her. So she and I have been going back and forth on like, somehow Andarna knows where she needs to be. So I started off with still unsure how Andarna knew to be there at the end of the book. But she always knows, and she always says throughout the series that I will be where I'm needed. She says that all the time. And so somehow she knows. And I don't know if it's just because her breed, she's an Irid, and that's something about them. And I have a theory that the Irids are strictly straight up magic, and something about them is just different. The way they are, their breed is different than the other 6 dragon breeds. And I said, I wonder if she never even left the continent and to go to the island that they had originally found the Irids in. And I am wondering that because she can't really fly long distances, and she had already been exhausted as it was because of how her wing muscles are. So I don't even know if she even left the island or what specifically, because there's no way, because I don't think that much time had passed between when Andarna left. Violet was in her emotional state coma thing. Not really a coma, but if you read the book, you know what I mean. Basically mourning the loss of Andarna. And then the battle that they went to fight the Venin and Theophany. And then Andarna coming back. I don't think she left. And then she came back. Those are the kind of the things that I was thinking. So I'm wondering if the Irid that she left with, I can't remember his name, that she left with, the 2 of them remained close. And of course, just Andarna came back to help. Those are kind of theories / questions. I truly do believe that the Irids are fully, truly magic, like straight up magic, because something about the way that Violet is able to still communicate, something with that on the islands with no magic, something with that is interesting. The next thing that I said was the scene with Xaden was confusing. So the end scene, his POV, where we all know turns into the worst part of this book. I said the scene with Xaden was still so confusing. Where did Panchek come from? Why is he here? Where did he come from? When did he arrive? How long has this happened? And then I was like, I kept going back and forth, making notes in my e-reader on the Kindle app. For some reason in my brain, I was like, is Berwin and Panchek the same dude? Are they the same? Has Panchek been in this whole time? No, they're not. I eventually got to a scene where they were literally together in the same scene. And Panchek got knocked out / killed potentially, because the way it was written, that whole POV was written extremely vague. And I know Rebecca Yarros did that on purpose, so they're not the same person, but where the heck did he come from? And then that whole scene was so confusing because, you know, obviously we have, oh, the next point was about the brother, so I'll get into that. And so it's been theorized who the new brother is. So who else? Because the way the Venin speak about each other is their brother / like, you know, sister. Because when Xaden first went to talk to Jack, it was, hey, welcome to the family, brother, or whatever it was. So we know that the way it's written is to insinuate that there is a new Venin that Xaden knows. So someone really close to him watched him struggle for all the months that he had first channeled from the ground to where he is now in this point. And so what initially like got Xaden to channel was Sigil was trapped and he felt helpless and needed to help her. And for some reason, that's the only reason. So I had wrote, I don't think Garrick is the brother. I think the last 3 to 4 chapters happen simultaneously. So like all the ones with multiple POVs, I think Rhiannon's chapter happens slightly before these events. So like there's a Violet chapter, the Imogen chapter, the Xaden chapter, I think those ones. And then the very last chapter happens, you know, after all these events. So I think they happen kind of simultaneously because there's a point in that Violet chapter where she talks about all of these shadows that kind of encompass everything. And I believe they briefly mention that in the Imogen chapter. If not, then that happens just before the Violet chapter and the Xaden chapter. This was me typing out what it is without actually like referencing the book. I said, if the Imogen chapter also happens simultaneously, Garrick was with Imogen. And so Garrick had stated something to the effect of having only enough power and energy to be able to walk one more time because he's a distance walker. And so he wouldn't be able to walk again after they did walk from where they were standing at the very end of the Imogen chapter with Quinn's body. He walked somewhere. He took them somewhere because there was Venin channeling the wall that they were on or whatever it was. And so I said, at the end, there was only one named of the 2 of 4 missing riders, and we're assuming one of them is Xaden, so there's 2 of them, so we know Bodhi is missing, Xaden is missing, for sure. I said, I guess it could be Bodhi, but that feels like way too on the nose, too obvious, too easy, but there were 3 people that Xaden trusted to keep a secret, except for Violet. So it was Bodhi, Imogen, and Garrick. Those were the 3 people that he said knew about him being Venin when they were explaining it to Mira and when Riddick had found out as well. So it literally, I think, it feels like it has to be Garrick or Bodhi. But because I feel like Garrick and like the Imogen chapter and the Xaden chapter happen simultaneously, it can't be Garrick. However, if it does happen in a way that takes place just after the Imogen chapter, I'd have to like reread it again and actually pay a little more attention to see if they feel like they take place at the same time. Because if they don't, then that does actually lead into, oh yeah, it might be Garrick. And my friend and I kind of talked about that here in some later texts. And I was like, maybe it is Garrick because he could have, walked that one last time, the energy he had from his dragon to wherever to save Imogen and move Quinn's body because they obviously weren't leaving Quinn's body. And then he channeled from the ground to turn Venin to go help / save Xaden. And then, yeah, so I'm not sure. Bodhi just feels way too obvious because they named him at the end. They didn't specify Garrick is also missing, but it's implied, I think. So, not sure about that. So that is question. Unless there is some random person that we don't know that they knew that Xaden was Venom. So someone we aren't even thinking of, that we didn't know knew. So, not sure. And then the next thing I said was, why is Dane so strong? Because when Sloane was siphoning to heal Brennan, or no, help Brennan heal Mira, she looked at Dane and said, someone like you shouldn't have that much power. For one, someone like you, what does that mean? Two, why does he have so much power? So that I'd love to know more about. And also the little connection Sloane and Dane have. That sounds like a fun storyline. And then the next thing I said was, what is Imogen's second signet? It seems like it's really powerful. So in her chapter, she does something, and I couldn't tell if it was with metal or something that basically saved her and Dane. And Dane said they were going to talk about whatever that was later. And then another thing that I thought about was, were all of Xaden's dreams that Violet had walked in unknowingly, were they fabricated by the Dark Wielders to manipulate him? Because what if, because during all of those, it was always something to the effect of, you will turn for love, you will turn for her, or bring her to me, or something like that, referring to what we assume is Xaden, or Violet, because these were Xaden's dreams. Violet just happens to be in them, and she never knew. So that is super questionable. Not sure. I feel like they were fabricated. So, because what it seems like, there is always a writer that manifests some signet that had already existed in Dark Wielders, because it feels like Dark Wielders live for freaking ever. So that is an interesting thing. So yeah, what else did I say? I mentioned more that the Irids sound like they might be pure magic, and there's definitely something more with the leadership in Bascaev. I feel like there are Venin hiding among them in terms of the leadership, and I'd love to see more of that. And another question was, what if Dane has a second signet and that's why he's so strong? Did his dragon bond him, lie about his heritage, and he is bonded to maybe his mom's dragon? We don't know anything about Dane's mom, so that's a question, potentially. I talked more about how Garrick's been side by side with Xaden on all the patrols, everything to, try to keep him in check, quote unquote, and not channel. So that could be evidence that he's the new brother, the new Venin. And then we talked about potentially something to do with the Temple of Dune, I believe it was. The one where, the silver hair thing kept on getting Violet's attention, and how Theophany also has the silver hair. And they talked about the dedication thing, and then that one scene with the priestesses in Erasia, where they're like, you never finished your dedication or something like that, and something about those scenes feel like maybe that's a clue into that being a cure for being Venin. Maybe? I don't know. But I think there's a connection there. Like something to do with the Temple of Dune, the silver hair, and a cure for Venin. And then another theory is, what if one of the other missing writers is Auric / Cam, who is the prince. And we learned at the very end that he probably has, his signet is precognition. He can kind of see the future, because he had given Violet some things that she's like, how did you know? How could you have known that these things were necessary, or these things need to be done, blah, blah, blah. And so my guess is, I wonder if something to do with the eggs. And if I remember correctly, earlier in Onyx Storm, they talked to, I want to say it was in whatever island it was that they worship Dune. That's the number one god that they worship. And that one is the one, I believe, wanted dragons in exchange for, or dragon eggs in exchange for their aid and their army. I'm thinking Auric saw something and he's the one who stole the dragon eggs. Like, two separate storylines. Auric stole those dragon eggs. Xaden and potentially Garrick are off doing whatever it is they're doing. And whatever it was in that time frame that Imogen wiped from Violet's memory. So I said, wonder if he saw something and stole the eggs that might be in search of the cure. I mean, we already think that Dune, Temple of Dune, is related. And as long as I'm remembering correctly that it was the island that worships Dune, this works. Because he also provided the dagger that was something to do with the Temple of Dune that killed Theophany. So somehow all of these things are tied together. And then of course another question was, what all did Violet learn in that like 12 hours she was missing and her memory was wiped? I guarantee it was something that she knew would be dangerous for her to know, which is why she asked Imogen to erase those memories. So probably who the other brother is, where Bodhi is, and the marriage thing, like all of that. Something to do with those things were dangerous for her to know if someone were to, you know, get hold of her, torture it out of her, read her memory, whatever it may be, for her to know, to then put the whatever events, those people in danger. So, and I think also she is married to Xaden, and now she's the Duchess of Tyrandor, which means she has to take care of the kingdom because that's what she promised Xaden. So that is literally all of the things. I could probably go on and on about it. So like back with the Auric thing, what unbonded dragons or bonded dragons, what dragons aided in the stealing of eggs? So because the Empyrean is divided. So that's a ton of questions too. So I'm excited for the next book. There still is no other release date, which is fine. I would like to see some. I don't care about waiting that long. I'll probably reread all of these books again before that book comes out. And yeah, so that's the end of Onyx Storm. I love that series so much. Let me know what you think and have theories of in the comments below. And I'm going to move on to the other 3 books that I read this month. If you don't know, I'm a Dream Vacations travel advisor specializing in cruises and Disney parks. And I now have the option on my website for you to book a video chat with me instead of trying to go back and forth through email to get all of the details of your trip worked out and get it booked. We can do it via video chat instead of through email, almost like we are face-to-face in person, but virtually. I also offer a new service called Video Vacation Memories, where I take all of your photos and videos from your vacation and I make a 5 or 10 minute video memory of your trip. And all of this information will be linked in my description box below. I also have another channel that I post all of my travels and also will be linked in the description box below. Okay, so I finished the first 3 books of the Inheritance games. I'm actually still reading the 3rd book, but I'll finish it by the end of this month. I'm going to read the little summary on Kindle. So this is what this book is about. Avery Grahams has a plan for a better future, survive high school, win a scholarship, and get out. Her fortune changes in an instant when billionaire Tobias Hawthorne dies and leaves Avery virtually his entire fortune. The catch? Avery has no idea why or even who Tobias Hawthorne is. To receive her inheritance, Avery must move into a sprawling secret passage-filled Hawthorne house where every room bears the old man's touch and his love of puzzles, riddles, and codes. Unfortunately for Avery, Hawthorne House is also occupied by the family that Tobias Hawthorne had just dispossessed. This includes the 4 Hawthorne grandsons, dangerous, magnetic, brilliant boys who grew up with every expectation that one day they would inherit billions. Heir apparent Grayson Hawthorne is convinced that Avery must be a con woman. He's determined to take her down. His brother Jameson views her as their grandfather's last hurrah, a twisted riddle, a puzzle to be solved. Caught in a world of wealth and privilege with danger around every turn, Avery will have to play the game herself just to survive. And so that's pretty much it. So my first impression, I knew it was YA, so that's fine. I love YA sometimes. And I thought it was gonna be more of like, they had to, for some reason, she was involved with, you know, the 4 boys, and they all were thrown into this house where they had to go through all of different puzzles to be able to get out, and the one that gets out gets the inheritance, but it's not quite that. That's what I thought it was, which is fine. It was still good. I really did enjoy the books I've finished so far, and I'm like 65-70% in on the 3rd book, 76% into the 3rd book, which I'll finish this week. And it was really good. I enjoyed the watching them, like reading them solve the riddles and the different things. So book 1 was about finding out about one particular event. Book 2, another particular event. Book 3 is a whole another particular event. And then I think book 4 is the brother's perspective, but I don't know if it happens in after book 3 or if it's during books 1 through 3. Not sure. And then book 4, I'm not sure entirely what it's about. I know book 5. And then book 6 is definitely a prequel because of the name of the book. And if you have read at least the 1st book and you see the title of the 4th book, you would know why. That why that is obvious. It's a prequel. So anyway, back to books 1 through 3. I really enjoyed the puzzles and the problem solving and the riddles that they had to go through and the little bits of romance that they have in there for, you know, it's YA, so it's very minimal and, you know, YA age appropriate. So that's been fun. The only thing, and this has nothing to do with the book, like I think the 1st one says that it's for like ages 12 and up, is there's a tiny bit of hand holding, and it's told from the perspective of Avery Grahams. So she's like remembering conversations, and literally word for word these conversations will come into the text in her inner dialogue often, and that kind of annoyed me a little bit. However, knowing that it's YA, it's not that big of an annoyance. Like, it's age appropriate for what it is. But I'm still really enjoying the story. It's a really easy read, which is what I needed. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I was kind of sort of in a reading slump, which is why I reread all of the Empyrean series books. And then I started this one knowing that it was going to be an easy read. I actually thought it was only 4 books, because I knew the 4th book was the perspective of the boys. And then I learned that there were 3 more books. So I will be reading those before I move on to anything else. And I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to read after that. I have Red Rising on hold, but I think I want to read a handful of like romances. So I guess it's because I also have a cruise in March, so it's like the last week, and I know I'm gonna read a lot while I'm on that cruise, so I might save some summer romances because that sounds like fun. I have some physical books with me, like that I own. I have the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. I think I have 3 books. I might bring those if I have a room when I pack. So we'll see what I actually do end up reading in March. I am somewhat of a mood reader and whatever I can get my hands on for free. So between Kindle Unlimited and library books and potentially what I own, that's usually how I decide what I'm reading, because if there's no waits, it's on Kindle Unlimited, I don't have to buy anything. That's typically how I decide what I'm reading also. So we'll see how quickly I get through these 3 books. 3 and a quarter, because I'm almost done with the 3rd book. So I have to read those 3 books, and then probably, because I have been averaging roughly a book a week, except for the last 2 books I read within 2 2 books in 1 week. So, because they were just that interesting. And my cat keeps waking me up in the middle of the night, so then I just roll over and read until I fall back asleep. So that's what I've been doing. And yeah, so I know this video is probably a lot longer than I anticipated. So hold on, let me roll back a little bit. So I think what'll happen is I will finish those 3 books, lead me up literally right before the cruise, and then I'll have like 3, 4 or so books on deck for the cruise. So some summer romances. It just sounds like fun, a good vibe while I'm on this cruise to Mexico. And yeah, so I know this video is a lot longer than my last one, but either you are a Fourth Wing fan and you enjoyed listening to my theories and stuff about the end of Onyx Storm, or you haven't read it yet and you skipped it and this video isn't that long for you anyway. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I will be doing these monthly. Mostly it'll just be like a recap of the books and whether or not I like them. I do not like rating books. I don't even look at ratings when I'm looking for books because it's such a subjective thing. So those types of ratings aren't going to really tell me whether or not the book is good. So in half the time I'm looking at books based on the cover. So anyway, I am now rambling and I'm gonna end this video here. If you would like to work together and we can get your dream vacation planned, I'll have all my information linked in the description box below. And if you do end up booking your trip with me, you'll get 10% off of my video vacation memories service, where I take all of your videos and photos from your vacation and put it into a 5 or 10 minute video memories, and that'll be linked down below as well. And my next video is going to be my vlog for my concert, my Bad Omens concert in Denver. And yeah, so if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel, and I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.